Hey everybody, welcome to another tutorial. This time we're going to talk about modules. I'm going to cover everything you need to know to get started on building modules and understanding them. So let's get started. Okay, so the very first thing I want to explain is modules are different from hooks. Basically, a hook is always turned on. So that means unless somebody writes something in there that's dependent on certain things, it's still always running. A module can be installed or uninstalled, turned on, turned off, and can be reconfigured in the administration part of Phoenix. So if we go into, for example, the box modules, and if I was to look at bestsellers and edit bestsellers, I can see that I have various options. If I mark this to enabled false and click save, of course now bestsellers, even though it's still in the database, it's currently disabled, therefore it won't show. So there's functionality in the administration to control it. A hook doesn't have any of this kind of functionality, and it doesn't have variable settings like this. You would have to go right into the code to make changes. Typically a module has three parts. It really comes down to how old the module is and how integrated it is into some of the newer ways Phoenix is being rewritten. But if we just go into look for bestsellers, so we find three files, which is very typical of a module. The first file is, in this case, it's a box module, so it's in the includes modules boxes folder. We also get a matching language file, so it's an includes languages English or whichever language. Modules boxes, so modules and boxes, the same folders. And then you'll notice the name of the module is exactly the same as the name of the language file for that module. And that's because by default, Phoenix will look for the active language and look for a matching file to the module that's enabled, and if it finds one, it will load it. So the naming has to be the same. Also, in this case, we have a template. So for this one, we've got includes modules, boxes, templates, and then we've got the same name of the file, just prepended with a TPL underscore for the template. So these three files, I'm just going to open each of them. So you can tell this is the main file. So again, I can see it's under includes modules, boxes, BM bestsellers. You can tell a newer module if it extends the abstract block module or an abstract module of any kind. If this is not part of the module, then it's likely an older module. For example, if I was to open up one of these, so here you can see the manufacturer's info module. This is written in an old way. You can see that it doesn't extend anything. So what that means is when you have a class that's extended, it means that it's layered on top of another class. So you can have multiple layers, and you can have shared layers between different classes so that multiple classes can share the same functionality. So for example, if the install process of a module is always going to be the same, just dependent on its settings, but it typically does the same kind of thing, then you can create those functions and methods in a class that's shared to a bunch of other classes that extend that class. And that saves you from having to rewrite the same code over and over and over again in every module to do the same thing. So prior to that being done in Phoenix, this is more what OS Commerce did in the past for how it wrote modules. I'm going to be focusing most on the proper way to do it going forward, but I will touch on the old way because there are some people that might be upgrading or adjusting older modules and want to understand how that works. Okay, so this bestsellers module extends the abstract block module. First thing to point out is there's this config key base. It's very important. And what this means is basically this entire BM bestsellers has this prepending all of its settings. So when it saves a setting to the database, every setting for this module will be modules, boxes, bestsellers, underscore status, or underscore position, or underscore some setting, or whatever it is. But everything will be prepended with this. So the config key base, you'll find that at the top of every one of the new modules that extend an abstract module. The second thing is the group, and this is typically used for how to position this module. So in this case, it's a boxes module. So the group that it belongs to is boxes. Now there's logic in the lower classes that will interpret the group and behave differently depending on the group. So it's very important that this be specified. So you'll notice that those two settings are sitting outside of any function. They're just inside the top of the class because these are settings of the class itself. Okay, so then we've got an execute. So if I look at that, that's basically all this code here. What the execute does in a module is it's responsible for loading the display or the visual or the logic of what that module does when it's being used. So in this case, being that we're on the bestsellers module, what it's doing is, and again, the box module for bestsellers would be on the store. You would have a bestsellers box and it would show the best-selling products. I don't currently have it enabled in the store, but that's basically what it's doing. So it's selecting products from the database, looping through them and presenting them in an array that gets passed into the block template to be further displayed as a block on the web page. So if I was to take everything out of this, I would see, even if this module was enabled, I wouldn't see anything inside this block. If we go to the get parameters function, so this is basically all of the settings. So if I just jump back over to the administration side, and we were looking at this a minute ago, you've got bestsellers, enable bestsellers module, minimum to display, maximum to display, content placement left or right, and a sort order. If we go look at this, we're going to see exactly the same items. And so this is what is building that administration configuration form. Some of these are simple text entries. And anytime you see the set function is basically using, in this case, it's a select box, and this is a function inside Phoenix that allows you to have a drop down. So we have left and right column. Actually, it's bullet points, I guess, radio buttons. So that's how we're getting that functionality. It defaults more to just a text box if you don't set the set function. You could really build your own functions as well. One thing, a little trick while we're at it, is if you leave outside the class. So again, the class starts here and ends here. You can actually append to this file a function and if this module is enabled, that function will actually be loaded into the code stack, and so it saves you from having to add this to a core file or add it somewhere else. I typically don't do this a lot. I mean, it is kind of a trick, but where I will do this is if I need to build some sort of a function for this module specifically that allows me to manipulate this data. So say, for example, this was going to be a color picker and I wanted people to click on this and get a actual pop-up of a color picker. I'd have to do some custom code to do that, but I could make this my color picker. I could make this my color picker and make it do everything I want. And again, this is PHP, not JavaScript, where this is going to be a little bit of both if we're going to do a color picker. So I'd have to build all that from scratch, but I could, adjust this accordingly. You'll notice if I take this out, you'll notice that it almost looks like the code is broken. And that's because the set function, the way it's written, it actually finishes the code for you. If you were interested in learning more about that, I could cover that in a later video. I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes while I'm doing this, but that is not broken. It does not require this, for example. The set function is actually, it takes the beginning part of this and it finishes it for you in another place. So, okay, so let's go back. What we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the bestsellers, and we're going to utilize that code just as a working example and change it for our own purposes. And we're going to create a simple alert box so that we can show a message on the side of our site that we decide to type in. It's just a simple example. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to make sure I revert this file back to not having any changes. So I'm going to actually start with the modules, boxes, bestsellers, and I'm going to change this. Now BM stands for box module. You'll notice they all have it. So you have to prepend it with a BM. And then we're going to call this my message. Okay. And we'll come back to that one. Next one we're going to do is the modules, boxes, templates. We're going to copy that file. So let's do this. So now I've got that file there. And then this one is the last one. It's the language file. So languages, English, modules, boxes. I'll copy that file. Okay, so I'm going to close all these files, and then I'm going to open my message. So we'll open all three of these. Okay, so first thing we got to do, and you'll notice if we're looking in the tree here, and again, I'm using PHP Storm as my editor. Highly recommend PHP Storm, but you'll notice that it sees an error. You know, you can tell it stands out from all of these because the class does not match the file name. And it's not happy about that, so it's a good reminder for me to fix it. Okay, so now it's happy. So we're going to change where it says module boxes. We want to leave that, but bestsellers, we're going to change that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a replace, and I'm only replacing in this file. Okay, and you have to have an underscore at the end because it prepends this to the rest of your settings. So you'll see how that comes together in a minute. So I'm going to replace all in this file. So that replaced everything down below. So I've got my module, boxes, my message, content placement, and so on. I'm going to go through each of the files and replace that. So this is the language file. So now I've replaced that in all three files, so I'm done with my replacing. It's good to do these things in order so that you don't forget to do them. It's good to go through each of the three files, make your changes to one, and consistently go through each of them and do it so that you're not creating bugs. So we're going to leave it in the boxes group because it's still a box module. We're going to remove everything in the execute. What I'll do here, I'm going to actually take these two lines. What this is doing in this particular one is it's getting the products. Again, remember we copied this from the bestsellers. It was grabbing all the products that were bestsellers, and if there were rows, and if those rows were greater than or equal to the minimum to display, then it would display them, otherwise it wouldn't. So this logic here is inside that if statement because, again, bestsellers, it required data to be able to finish it. Ours is a little bit different, so we still need those two lines, but we don't need everything else. So I'm going to remove all of that. I'm also going to rem out those 2 lines for now. We'll come back to that. So under get parameters, status is used by every module, and it's basically on or off, true or false. So we're going to just replace this with enable my message module. Do you want to add the module to your shop? I will leave that as it is, true or false, that's all good. Next thing, my message minimum to display. We don't have a minimum to display because we are going to show a message. So rather than this, and again, this was just a text entry box, if you recall. If we go back here, this was, you could have typed whatever you want in here. So as a result of that, we'll just reutilize this. So I'm going to say message to display. Enter your message. And value, we'll just leave it blank to start. The max message display, again, not needed for this particular module, so we'll just remove that whole array item. The placement, right or left, we still need to know that. Is the box module that we're creating going to show up over here on the left, or is it going to show over here on the right? And that's something we need to leave in there. So we'll just proofread it. There's nothing there specific to the bestsellers that we copied, so we'll just leave it as it is. And then the sort order, as everybody knows, that's the default of where to display it. We'll leave it as 0. You should never have sort orders that are the same. The old Phoenix system, doesn't handle that well in a lot of cases. So if you have 3 items that are all number 5, it might not display 2 of them at random. So you should always stagger your sort orders, jump them by 10s or something like that. So 10, 20, 30 rather than 1, 2, 3. But for now, we'll just leave that. As 0. And so that's pretty much everything we need there. So I'm going to go to the next file. So this is actually the template file. So modules, boxes, templates, template, box model, my message. So here we have the modules box, my message box title, which if we flip over to the language file, that's this. So it's going to say bestsellers. So we're going to change that to say store alert. We're also going to, this one here is what you see at the top of here, and that is actually the title of the module everywhere it's displayed. So that would also be what's displayed over on the left, and if you're installing the module, that's what it would be called there as well. So we'll just call that the same as what we see in the top title, and we'll say show store message. Okay, so language file is pretty much finished. Oops. We're going to keep the box designed the same as the others, so we're not going to go changing a bunch of this, but we don't need to loop through bestsellers. We simply need to take the message, which if we go to here, we can see that the message is going to be, we forgot to change this, module box is my message min display. We want to change that to my message text. Now again, I could call that whatever I want, but that seems to make sense. So if I go back now here, again, we're keeping this real simple for this example, but I can just simply echo that. So that text is actually going to be loaded from the database. So if I go back here, each of these, once this module is enabled, each of these is going to be created in the database, and each of the settings is going to be saved to the database. Sometimes when you get an updated module and you have to go and replace the files and then disable the module and re-enable the module, the reason currently in Phoenix that you have to do that is because that's the only trigger to install new settings into the database, is to disable the module and re-enable it. By doing that, it adds the new elements to the database and can utilize them. on some of my mods that I've built, I'll actually, in the execution string, I'll detect if that key is in the database, and if it's missing, I'll install it so that it saves you from having to disable and re-enable it. The downside to that, of course, is that logic has to run every single time the module is loaded, which isn't very efficient. So it's just a matter of what you feel is more efficient depending on the circumstances. So I'm going to re-enable this. So this block template basically is how it places it into the left and right of the site. It goes in and grabs our template data group, which, if you recall, we set that to box. Boxes was the group. So, this is what builds the actual layout. This will display that layout. So let's go and enable this. So if I go into my boxes, install module, store alert, if I install the module, there it is. If I edit this, and we'll set that, we'll leave that at 10 on the right hand side, say have a great day, and save that. So everything looks like it's working correctly. I still have my message in there. If I click edit, it saved it. If I was to go into the database and look at what this looks like, jump over here. Okay, I'm just going to quickly jump into the database tool that I've written here and say select star from configuration. That's going to select everything, but it's quicker. And then if I search inside there, I can see the database values that have been added. So that's a quick, easy way of kind of explaining how that works. Inside configuration, every time you insert data from the module, it's being put into here. If I was to go and remove this module, those values would disappear, and that's what turns the module off. Okay, so if I refresh my store, I have a store alert, have a great day. I don't care for the placement of that, so I probably go and do a little bit of work on making it look a little nicer. This was a list group before, so I might change this to be something where it's like padding for text center, something like that. Makes it look a little bit prettier. But now I do have my store alert. If I want to go edit this and change this, and save that, it changed it as well. I can change my placement, so if I edit this and change it to the left column, save that, refresh, it ends up over here. Obviously that's all familiar to people, but it just shows you that a little bit of code in the module can tie into a lot more logic. So you don't have to program left and right, you just have to make sure you include that option correctly and get the syntax correct. So that's why I find you're better to find a module that suits your needs, that's close to what you're trying to build. Find the 2 or 3 files that are responsible for that module, clone the module, rebuild it the way you want it, and it'll allow you to kind of make sure you don't miss anything and you can kind of follow along. Sometimes you can overlook settings, so you want to make sure you really proofread your work. The function names and everything are very, very important. So you want to make sure you pay attention to those details. This is a very simple module. There are modules that are much more complicated. I actually struggled to find one that was this simple to show, because I know not everybody's a software developer and not everybody fully understands how PHP works, but I think this kind of covered that. While I'm talking here, I just again want to point out to everybody to go over to the phoenixcart.org, go under help, support forum, GoPro. I always tell everybody go here. I know it sounds like a broken record if you're watching my videos, but it's very important that everybody does partake in this. I'm sure that most people that are listening to this do participate and do become a pro member. But if you're kind of on the fence about it, it's a good idea. It's kind of like insurance for your business, right? If your business is relying on Phoenix for its underpinning software, then extremely important that continue to exist and continue to be maintained and supported. If you go pro, it just helps keep that going. It keeps people moving in the right direction as far as the software development goes and keeps the community strong. So with that, I'm going to jump back. I mentioned that I would cover the differences with the older modules. So we're kind of done writing our test module here, but if you're interested in what the older way of writing modules is all about, I'm just going to open up something here. We use manufacturers. I know that's not the one I had before, but it will still suffice. So with this, the layout of the older modules is just, there is no extending of a class. So that means everything that this class does, everything that this module does is all encompassed in this one file. So there's a lot of redundancies when you do it that way. So we have the code matches the class name. The group is still identified as boxes. So that's not any different. Title, description, sort order, and enabled, those are all set up. In this case, enabled is false by default. These are utilized later in the code. Construct will set this title to equal this language file item. This description will load the description from the language file. Again, this is all done automatically with the newer way of writing modules. It's assumed that there'll be a title and a description. Therefore, they're automatically set by the abstraction modules. This doesn't extend any abstraction modules. Therefore, it all has to be done manually in here. And again, that's why it's no longer really the right way of doing it. If defined, so if the status is not false, then it's enabled and continue on. Otherwise, do nothing. So again, all of this is only needed in an older module. The get data is basically, in this case, perfect. This is a perfect example of an older module. So you've got the execute, which, like we had in the other module, is responsible for displaying something. This basically grabs get data, which is a specific method that's in this class. So all this content is responsible for feeding execute to get the data to load these two files that we covered before. It's just sloppy. Is enabled, function is enabled, is just checking to see if it's enabled. Check, we'll check the database to see, or we'll check the stack to see if this particular variable is defined and return true or false. Here you have all of the inserts of all of the variables into the database. So if you remember on our previous module, just jump over there. The previous module, this is the new way of doing it, where you just set an array of the setting and the key values, but you don't have to worry about the SQL logic or anything else, where this is, again, sloppy. You're talking directly to the configuration. It just allows for more error and it's more bloat. So, I'm not a big fan of that. And then you've also got to remove, where it's removing everything where the keys are in this array under keys, which again is just redundant. So, here we have the status, but we've also got the status up there. We've also got the status here. It's just all clumsily tied together. It's so much easier to manage if it's written using the newer methods. So if you are copying a module for your own purposes for playing around, I would encourage you to just grab the ones that extend the abstract layer if you can. if it's a module that you're rewriting from an old OS Commerce install, you can still rework it to function this way. It would just take a little bit more work. So that's really it for this video. I do plan on doing some more in-depth videos. I plan on doing a video series for building a more complicated module. It might be 3 or 4 videos. I also plan on building an app video series, which will be many videos. I'm not sure when I'll have time to do that, but I do plan on doing it. It's definitely worthwhile. Building tools like, my database tool and stuff like that. Those are not created as modules. They're not created as hooks. They're actually created as a separate tool or a separate area of the administration. So I'll do a video shortly, probably on a simple version of that, and then try and do a video series on something a little bit more complicated. So until then, if you could give me a like and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. Also would appreciate some comments. I know people are watching the videos. Comments go a long ways to making me feel like it's worthwhile, and I'd love to hear your ideas for new videos. It gives me some ideas on what to do. I do have a list of videos I want to do, but that's kind of based on what I perceive everybody wants, but I don't know what people are looking for. So feel free to drop that in the comments, and until next time.